Hey everybody, I'm Leah.
And I'm Maggie.
And this is our new show, Dazzling. What's it called?
Divinely beautiful and dazzlingly clever.
Divinely beautiful and dazzlingly clever, which we both are. But also it's from Anne of Green Gables.
Anne of Green Gables, a classic. But also we do think a lot of each other.
And ourselves. So we both used to work at Between the Covers, and now we live in Hoboken together. We met working there. Mm-hmm. Now we're roommates. We still like reading. We still both work in a bookstore.
We still like each other.
We do still like each other. Can you believe it?
Very fond of each other.
So we're doing a new YouTube series for Between the Covers, one of our favorite places, about like books we're reading and books we want to recommend and books we think are good, books we think are bad. No, we probably won't do that.
Probably not. Probably not. But
probably just books we think are good.
Right. When we really like something, you'll just pay attention to that. Yeah.
So since tomorrow's Halloween, we're doing like spooky, scary, not even scary, because we have very different metrics for reading scary as compared to watching scary. Yeah, different things scare me in books than in shows. Because I feel like on TV, I'm scared of like jump scares.
Sure.
Or like scary imagery.
Right, of course. And a jump scare in a book is just a totally different beast than...
Yeah, I wouldn't even know how that would work.
Right. No, in scary books, it's more about the anticipation, the waiting. Without further ado...
Yeah, do you want to do...
I may launch into one of my picks in terms of an excellent spooky book. Over here. So this is Mexican Gothic by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. This is a galley copy, so you won't have that on there. I loved this book. It was magnificent. It's set in the 1950s in Mexico, and this, presumably on the cover, this beautiful, smart socialite named Noemi is called to her cousin's house because her cousin sent her an alarming letter about how she's afraid of the house and she can't leave it, so Noemi's going to go check it out. And her cousin has married into this very proper, very mysterious British family who has established silver mines in the mountains. So she travels up there to meet her, and it's like she's jumped into a totally different world. It's this huge British manor. No one's allowed to speak Spanish. The family is horrifically racist, and there's something they're not telling her about the history of the house, about why her cousin is so sick. So as Noemi starts asking more questions, the house is like listening in some ways, and you know that there's something happening out in the world. So it's not fully gothic, and that you're not questioning, is this totally in her head? Is she going mad too, just like her cousin? But it was magnificent. I tore through it. It was so creepy and so beautiful. And I think I said if Stephen King and Guillermo del Toro decided to have a book club in which they couldn't read anything the other person wrote, I think this would be on their list. It's just lovely.
It sounds really good.
It's really good.
Well, I have two books by the same author, so I'm going to talk about them at the same time. This one is newer, Carmen Maria Machado's new graphic novel, which I think was actually serialized in like comic books, but I didn't read it until it was all at once, because I'm not a big comic book person, but when I do read them, I tend to read them like that, where once it's like, after several comic books come out, they come out in like a volume. Anyway, Carmen Maria Machado, I'm a huge fan of hers. She was a Festival of the Book, I think the first year or the second year. But this one, so anyway, this new one, it's very scary. It takes place in this town where something happens to the women, and you don't know what, and you don't know why, and they're very forgetful. They don't know what happened to them. Sometimes they'll find women just in the street, just like staring. They don't know why. And also sometimes the women will turn into sinkholes or into monsters, and you don't know why. And the whole book is sort of like figuring out why that is, why all these women have such like a shared experience, but they don't know what it is. And I mean, it's very allegorical for like the shared experience of women in real life, and like under the patriarchy, and under like there's some like sexual assault happening, and but I loved it. The illustrations by I think Tamra Bond villain are beautiful. But it was very scary and stressful because it's a lot of something I think that's good in like a horror book is when you don't know what's happening. I think it's scarier if you don't know, if you can't see it, if you don't know what it is.
Yes.
And there's a lot of that in this because it's very, you just have no idea what's wrong. Just something is wrong.
Right.
And it's about like two teenage girls specifically navigating this town. It's very interesting. It's very like a little Twin Peaksy.
Okay. I totally get that. If you know what is lurking around you, you can like plan and you can find weaknesses. But if you are totally in the dark, there's nothing to do but wait for the next move, which is so scary.
And I think
it's
horror
to have
movies,
to tell yourself, I have to wait. We have to pause.
Yeah, and I think horror movies that do that are really effective as well, where like you don't see whatever violence or whatever, the camera pans on. Because whatever you imagine is the scariest thing to you, I think.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that in this, which I like a lot. And then the other book by her, which is what she came to the festival for, is Her Body and Other Parties, which is a collection of short stories that I loved. And a lot of, I think almost all of them have a little bit of a supernatural, scary element. One of my favorites is she does like, The Husband Stitch is the one that you can find online for free if you want to like test it out, because it was published before the book. So
I think that was my first introduction to her.
It's very scary.
Yes.
And then she also does a retelling of one of Between the Covers, our favorite little like, would it be a folk tale? It's in like a children's book, The Green Ribbon, where it's like the woman has the green ribbon around her neck and her husband is like, what's under there? And she won't tell him, she won't tell him. And on her deathbed, she's like, okay, you can untie my ribbon, and her head falls off. And it's just like a little folk tale. But in this version, it's like all women have a ribbon somewhere on their bodies, and it has to do with like their hidden trauma or their like secrets they keep from their family. And it's really interesting the way, I mean, this is a lot of like, again, much like this one, exploring like womanhood, but through a lens of horror, of supernatural elements, of like allegory.
Yeah.
I loved everything in this, and now I will read anything she writes, anything she puts out. There's a story in here that's, I think it's called Especially Heinous, and it is,
yes.
Especially Heinous, and it's, like Law and Order SVU, but it gets more and more absurd, and it is like, it's almost like you fell asleep while watching an episode of SVU, and this is like your dream while it's playing in the background, is how it feels reading it.
Yes.
And it's kind of scary.
It's kind of scary.
And
it's
stressful.
Surreal.
Yeah.
It's very surreal. Like liminal space.
Very much.
Of Law and Order Special Victims Unit.
Yeah.
So it's intense.
It's intense. It's really good, though. I really loved this all of the stories in it are great. But yeah, I would recommend just looking up Husband Stitch, because that one was published in like literary magazines and stuff beforehand, so you can test it out and see if you like it. What's your next book?
My next book, I'm going to segue right into yours.
Oh, yeah.
Which, oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
So I read, I don't have a copy of it, unfortunately. I read it.
Yeah, we don't have copies of everything, but...
once again, an advanced copy that I had emailed to me. So, different reading experience. I by far prefer a paper book, but it is what it is. So I read The Year of the Witching by Alexis Henderson, and this is the most straight up horror novel on my list. Mexican Gothic was spooky and sinister, but this was straight up terror, horror, not for the weak of stomach. I'm gonna say it like that. But I loved it once again. It's a debut novel, which I always think is very cool. And it is this patriarchal, puritanical village where magic has been banished to this forest, and these evil witches try to take over the town at one point. They've since been banished to the woods. The woods is totally off limits. Everyone obeys this group of priests, and there is a prophet who sees these divine things and guides these people to the right path of life. It's, extremely puritanical, so not a lot of power for women, not a lot of mobility for women, and the main character, Emmanuelle, is an outsider because her mother Her mother fell in love with a man outside of the village and outside of the race. Emmanuel's mother was white, her father was black, so that is an added prejudice. There's added abuse that she has to stomach because of that. She just wants to be a part of the village. She loves her mother's family who has taken her in. She just wants to be a good daughter, a dutiful, devout daughter. And one night, I believe it's a goat, if you've seen The Witch, you know this will not go well, runs into the forest. She cannot afford to lose this said goat. She runs into the forest and she encounters these witches who are so scary. And she's horrified, of course, but she starts to question what happened to her mother when her mother passed away, and where her father's family is from, and if the prophet is telling them everything about how these witches came to be and who the real dangerous party is. Like, spoiler alert, it's everyone. Everything is dangerous.
Yeah.
But it is, once again, I flew through it. I had to tell myself to slow down. The language is so lush and also terrifying, and you forget that you're reading something scary because it's so beautifully written that you're having such a fun time that you're not fully realizing there are buckets of blood in this chapter. I compared it to any of the A24 movies. So if you loved Hereditary or like The Witch, if that was your vibe, Midsummer, yes, because it's a female character who is just completely overwhelmed by everything, and still she finds a way to outsmart, outrun, outdo everything around her that's trying to keep her down. Yeah. So oddly empowering.
Yeah. A lot of horror is very like about women.
Yes.
A lot of horror is like allegorical. I mean, two of mine are...
Yeah. Well, consistently women read more horror.
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
It's very interesting. I wonder why.
My next one is my most traditional horror, and it is... I've been very slowly making my way, because it's very big, and so I've been reading it like in between other books. Stephen King's It is a brick. It's about children in Derry, Maine, and in Derry, Maine, something is wrong, and children go missing and die every 27 years, and this group of kids in the 50s encounter this creature, which often takes the form of a clown, but it also takes the form of whatever you're most afraid of, which is why it goes after kids, because kids' fears are much more tangible than adult fears, because it's like snakes, or I think like the Wolfman shows up, like it's...
Right.
Versus, like, existential adult fears of, like, my family dying, or...
I can't pay my bills.
Yeah. Which is why it goes after kids, and they think maybe they've defeated it when they're children. This is, and you know this in the beginning, because it flashes back and forth between their adult selves 27 years later and their child selves, their, like, 12 or 13-year-old selves. And, they think maybe they've killed it, but they promise, like, okay, if we didn't, we all have to come back in 27 years to take care of this. But I really like it. It has the best of Stephen King, in my opinion, in that it's...
Really?
Well, no, like, it's not the best one. I'm saying it has
best
the best...
of.
Yeah, like, it has the horror of The Shining, but also, like, the heart of, like, The Body, which is Stand By Me. Because this... Sometimes I joke that when I watch it, what I really want is not the scary clown. What I want is to watch Stand By Me and then The Big Chill, where I just watch children have fun and then adults reunite. But the scary stuff is cool too. It's very interesting because it has the adult sections and the child sections, it has the like tangible child's fears that are very scary, but also preys on their adult fears. And a lot of times their adult fears are connected to their child fears.
Sure,
which is,
of course.
Right, which is everybody. So I really love it. I'm not done. Because I'm going, I'm slowly making my way through it. But I like Stephen King. I could always recommend a Stephen King. He's, a machine.
Of course, yes.
He's got the classics, and then he's got the ones that are still fun. Like I love The Shining, but I also had fun reading Dr. Sleep.
Shifting my list totally away from what I've been talking about before. This was the lightest of my reads. This is much more if Halloween Town and Practical Magic are your ideal Halloween fare, and you prefer more like autumnal aesthetic than actual scariness, this would definitely be a good pick for you. So it is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. It's by V.E. Schwab, who I've read before, and I think she's marvelous. And it gives off like Night Circus vibes. I've been trying to think of the closest book in terms of I just want to wrap a blanket around myself and maybe have like some hot chocolate.
Everyone always
sitting
wants...
next to me, and I just want to cuddle with this book and flip to the beginning and start over.
Everyone always wants a new Night Circus. Like, I feel like people
Yes!
always want what's like the Night Circus, and there's so little like the Night Circus.
There's so little like it. And I think it's just a combination of that world is so beautiful and vividly realized, and you just want to sink into it. And I think V.E. Schwab did a brilliant job with this book because, well, let me just get into it. Because we're flying through time at various points. So you don't have like the circus as the one firm setting. So it begins at the turn of, I believe it's the 1700s. Oh. This young woman, Addie, is going to get married. She does not want to be married. She wants to be free. She wants to travel the world, but it's 1700s France. She doesn't have an option. So she runs away from home. She goes into the forest. Once again, everything happens in the forest. And she meets this old god that, like, the peasants have been worshiping, who has, like, died out since the advent of Christianity. But he's also been called the devil and a trickster. He's this dark, mercurial being who preys on human weakness and want. And she wants to be free. She doesn't want to get married. She wants to be free to go on adventures. So she makes this deal with this Faustian creation. And of course, there's always a dark side to a deal like that. And it turns out that when she leaves the forest, she can never be remembered. So her family and her friends can never remember her. Anyone she meets, the moment that she is out of eyesight, she is a stranger. She can't even leave her mark on the world. She can't write letters to her family. She can't carve her name into a tree. She is totally free, but at the same time, she is completely alone, which is very frightening to consider. So we're following Addie through the years as she tries to make her life better in some ways. So at first, she's very... she's driven by lust and material wealth, and she's not really thinking about the future. She's just living for right now, and even that burns out. And this creature, who she's named Luke, to give him a name to be able to control him in that way, he keeps coming back when she's having, a terrible time, when she's destitute at one point. She's just completely miserable. And he comes back and he says, I can take this all away. If you give me your soul, I can free you from this. But she's incredibly stubborn, which is why I like her so much. And she's like, no, I will conquer this and I will conquer you. Go away. So we follow Addie through the centuries all the way up to modern day New York. And she's in a bookstore and she steals a book because she can. And she comes back to the bookstore and the clerk remembers her and says, hey, you stole that book. What are you doing in here? And she is like, oh my goodness, after 350 years, someone knows me. What is happening? I have to know more about this person. And that person is Henry, who is the other protagonist in the novel. And he also has some abilities that go beyond the pale. He is extraordinarily empathetic. So he can feel so deeply what other people are feeling that it kind of wreaks havoc on his life too. So his joy is tremendous, world-shaking joy, and then his sadness, his anger, all of that is shaking him to his core as well. So he meets Addie and she meets him, and this friendship and this romance blossoms, and Addie is terrified this whole time that he will just snap out of it and not know who she is. She has to try and sneak around his friends when he tries to introduce her to his world, and she's like, I can't be a part of your world, but I really want to be. And meanwhile, Luke has surfaced again, and he doesn't know what's going on, and he does not like this either, so he is circling as well. So it is very Halloween in terms of the fairy tale element and the spookiness element, but overall way lighter.
Yes.
Definitely a romance compared to the other two.
Mm-hmm.
And very, very night circusy because the magicians are falling in love. In that book, the magicians have to duel each other eventually, but right now they're in love and they're so impressed by each other's magic and they're friends in this very lonely world, and that's the vibe that Addie LaRue strikes. So it was a lovely curl up with my blanket, a cup of cocoa beside me kind of autumn read. I'm really glad I found it.
Yeah, it sounds lovely. She sold me. I'm gonna read it now. So those are our main books we want to talk about, but we also just wanted to list some other recommendations that we really like. For children, I loved Bunnicula when I was little, which is about a vampire rabbit, and Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. Stephen Schwartz, I think. It might not be Stephen, but Schwartz. And they have the scariest illustrations that are still painted in my brain.
Yeah.
And also they're adult horrifying, and they were in every elementary school classroom I ever had. My brother and I loved scary stuff. We just wanted everything to be a little bit Halloween-y.
Yes.
So Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark was perfect. They even, a few years ago, they switched the illustrations to less scary, and then they switched them back.
They're just so scary. They
They're
are
so
burned into
good. And
my
it's
head.
a lot of old wives' tales, and a lot, it's stuff you've heard before, but then also stuff you haven't.
So
But,
scary.
kids all love it and can handle it, weirdly.
Yes.
Yeah, so I would definitely recommend those two for children. We both loved for adults, and I think teenagers could read this also. It's for adults, but it's not, it's about teenagers. My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. We loved it.
I think Grady Hendrix is a favorite at Between the Covers.
Yeah, I want to read his new one about Southern vampire hunting.
Yes.
I checked it out, I put it on hold at the library, but I haven't. I'm on the list.
You'll get it eventually.
I'll get it eventually.
Yeah.
But My Best Friend's Exorcism is about two best friends in high school.
Yep.
And one of them gets possessed, and it's about trying to exercise.
Oh, you know what? It's very strong Jennifer's Body vibes.
Yes, it is. Which we love. We revisited Jennifer's Body in 2020. I like when stuff, because it's both of them are horror that is focuses on the intensity of teenage female friendship. Yep. Which is intense. Best friends. Yeah, 15-year-old best friends are in love with each other. In love with each other, and also capable of being so mean to each other. You can be in love with, and just the on a dime sometimes, which gives it a supernatural feeling. Yes, because it's is she possessed or is she just mean to me now?
It's do we like the same boy? Yeah. And now she's really competitive. I think YA horror does a great job of feeding into female friendships. Yeah.
What's that pink one that you...
The Merciless.
Scary.
Is so scary. It's a new girl in town, and she's taken in by the popular girls, and she's awesome. I don't have to be worried anymore. These girls are gorgeous and smart, and everyone loves them except for this one girl at school. And the queen bee says, you know what? We should help her. We should exercise her. And it goes dark. It is so wild. And once again, I flew through it. Yeah. I was just going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, the entire time through.
Yeah. I think that's it.
Yeah.
Well, I hope you guys enjoyed our first episode. Yes. We'll be back with more recommendations.
Very exciting.
Comment if there's, I don't know, anything you want to know.
I don't know, if you want to tell us how divinely beautiful and dazzlingly clever we are. We love compliments.
We do love compliments. Leave those
below. Only compliments.
And all of these books you can get from Between the Covers if you email them or call them.
Of course, yes.
You can get any of these. Our favorite people.
From our favorite booksellers, our friendly neighborhood booksellers, Between the Covers.
Yeah. That's all. See you guys next time.
See you guys. Happy Halloween, everyone.
Yes, happy Halloween.
Have a safe, socially distanced Halloween. Pop your popcorn. Watch some movies. Slip a mask on if you must. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right.
Bye.
Divinely beautiful and
Dazzlingly
dazzlingly
clever.
clever. I have it down.
Watch me misfeed you that information.
I know, it's dazzlingly
And
beautiful,
we've
divinely
we've
clever.
botched it entirely.
We have to start all over.
Oh, the embarrassment.